The buffalo, yes, a large animal that once and still does roam the prairies, but also it's the name of what was to be one large Canadian province encompassing what is now known as Alberta and Saskatchewan. But that idea was rejected. The Buffalo Project remembers that. It is now a group of people who want a fairer deal, a more equitable arrangement within Canada. Derek Robinson is the founder and CEO of MASH Media. He served as Brad Wall's chief of digital strategy, and Brad Wall, the former premier of Saskatchewan, was one of the early adopters of this idea known as the Buffalo Project. So Derek is with us now. Welcome. I like the name Buffalo Project. Tell us a little bit of the story.
Yeah, so it's a great name and it's a great story. And the whole idea is when Alberta and Saskatchewan, they were actually supposed to be one province. They weren't supposed to be separated, but the powers that were in the East, the Liberal government at the time, kind of felt like those two provinces were combined. It would be too powerful and it would challenge the power in the East and be more difficult to control. So they decided to split it up into two provinces, and that's why we're split pretty much right down the middle. And what we're finding today, and I think why the Buffalo Project was really created, was because those two provinces are so aligned in so many different ways, especially in this whole idea of a fight for a new deal within Canada, a more fair and equitable deal. It's really a time for us to come together as provinces again, break down some of those barriers and work together towards a better position within Confederation.
Okay, it's getting a little confusing these days because the Wexit Party, a Western exit party named after the Brexit movement, obviously in the UK,
Yep.
just recently had a meeting and decided they would call themselves the Buffalo Party of Saskatchewan. This is not what you're about. You're not about separating from Canada. You're about fixing the arrangement inside Canada.
That's right. And so, yeah, they decided to use the Buffalo name. I think it's popular and they liked it. And so we asked them to not do it and they decided to do it anyways. We think it's quite confusing actually for a Saskatchewan political party to be called Buffalo when really it's about two provinces. That's the history of the name, but they've done it anyways. And our movement's really about trying to make sure we don't separate, because if we don't get a fair deal within Confederation within a decent period of time here, I think the flames of separation are going to be burning much hotter in the very near future. And we've seen that a lot. You know, we have a lot of polling, Senator, just talking about how Alberta, about 75% of people in Alberta and 72% of people in Saskatchewan are dissatisfied with the province's treatment by the federal government. And a lot of those people we found actually want action towards more autonomy within Confederation right now. They don't want to wait. And those are pretty high numbers. And there's a lot
very high numbers. Yeah.
Those are incredible. When you 75, in political polling or public opinion polling, if it's 75%, that's basically everyone, because a quarter of the people don't really even know what you're talking about. So to have that high of a response means something. And then the amount of people that actually want to separate, there's different polling out there, but some people say it's high as 40%, some people say 30%. And then, that's usually dismissed by people in other parts of the country. Then they're like, oh, only, 35% of your people want to separate. That's not that big of a deal. And it's like, that's a third of our population. Right. 1 in 3 people want to get out of Canada right now. Like these are Quebec numbers. In fact, maybe a little bit worse than it has been in Quebec for a number of years. So this is really serious. And I don't think the country gets it for the most part.
I'm wondering if COVID, in a sense, has actually exacerbated it, because there was an MP standing in the virtual chamber the other day talking about how more money has gone to the We Charity than went to the energy and agricultural sectors in total in terms of aid and support during COVID. Using examples like that, I'm thinking it might have heightened it in a sense.
It has. And when we came up with this letter, which we can get into, I'm sure, in a bit, but we came up with this letter, and it's signed by about 60 really influential individuals across Alberta and Saskatchewan, about 7 concerned citizen groups calling for action for this new deal. And we're like, should we release this in the middle of the summer, in the middle of a pandemic? The timing just didn't seem right to us. But we just kept hearing anecdotally that people were so incredibly frustrated. And we thought, well, is that really fair? Like, the federal government's doling out all this money through support payments. are people still going to be that angry? And it turns out they're actually more angry now than they were previously. And I think it's just because Albertans and Saskatchewanians are smart. They know that they're going to have to pay for all of this. This is their money that is right now being distributed with a whole bunch of debt, and they're going to have to pay off that debt. They've done it before, and unfortunately, as being the economic drivers of the country in a large way, they know they're going to have to pay it off. And they feel like their money is not being spent responsibly right now, especially with the We Charity scandal and a number of other scandals happening right now with the Liberal government. So you're absolutely right. I think it has made it worse, and it's not going to get better anytime soon.
I was reading some numbers yesterday about this, that the energy sector writ large, that's not just oil and gas, it's all forms of energy, that it is the largest industry in this country outside of government and accounts for up to 14% of GDP. If we had a 10% increase in natural resource production alone, it could boost the GDP over the next 4 years by about $60 billion. Like, this could be key to the recovery.
It has to be. People don't understand that Canada is a resource-based economy. We absolutely are. And you look at that in the history of our economy. If oil is doing well, natural resources are doing well, Canada is typically doing very well. And you even look at the money that Alberta has distributed to the rest of Canada over the last 50, 60 years, it's staggering. And, the provinces that don't develop their natural resources, it's kind of funny how it works, because Quebec actually has a disincentive to develop their natural resources. Even though they actually have a lot of resources, they choose not to develop them. And there's two reasons for it. One, it's bad politics to develop natural resources in Quebec, and it's good politics to slander the people that are. So you see a lot of Quebec politicians bashing Alberta's oil industry, but they benefit a lot from it through equalization. About $497 billion over the last 60 years.
Okay, let's talk about equalization. You referenced this letter, so you've put together kind of a statement of what you stand for and sending it off to people who you hope will listen. So there's 5 key points, and the first one is a fair formula for national transfers. So there's a lot made of how much Alberta in particular contributes to equalization and fiscal stabilization. It hasn't always been the case. So in this country, sometimes you're have province, sometimes you're have not, and it kind of works out, but you're saying the formula doesn't work.
No, it's not responsive. It doesn't work very well at all. As we've seen in the last 3 or 4 years, that oil industry has been very down and Alberta's economy has been atrocious. But Alberta has not been a net recipient in Canada. Saskatchewan, the same idea. And, you look at a province like Quebec that's getting a massive amount of payments, and they were balanced. They had their budget balanced, and they were cutting taxes, and they were giving away money like it was free. And it was coming from Alberta and Saskatchewan. A little bit of BC and Ontario as well. And kind of back to the Quebec discussion, but they have a disincentive to develop their economy, because if they develop their natural resources, that actually harms them in the equalization formula. So it would get them less money through the Federation if they develop their own economy. So we have this dependency issue that's being created in other parts of the country from those that actually want to develop their economies.
Are you opposed to the whole idea of being your brother's keeper or your brothers or sister's keeper, that have-nots need help? I know Saskatchewan was a have-not province for a very long time, and we were the recipients. So do you just, you don't think that should be the bargain in this country, or you just want a different formula for calculating it?
No, it just needs to be more fair. Right now it's not responsive. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. No one understands it. It provides disincentives for people to develop their own economies. We should certainly share across the country and make sure there's equitable services. I think pretty much every Canadian would agree that's a good idea, but at the levels that has been happening is not fair, and it's not right, and that needs to change. And it's not just equalization, it's the fiscal stabilization program, it's the Canada Health Transfer, it's the social transfer. There's a lot of things that need to be changed there. And one thing that is confusing for people is they think all of this stuff needs, a constitutional amendment. It's like we have to get 7 provinces representing 50% of the population to make changes to the equalization formula. Well, no, that's not true at all. You could actually change it through regulations, most of the time just an order in council that a prime minister could just sign and actually change the equalization formula, like Stephen Harper has done in the past. And so a lot of people that have that argument, they're just completely wrong on that. And it just takes a willing federal government that wants to bring more fairness within the federation to actually make that happen. So the idea of this referendum that we're proposing, and that I think is going to be held in Alberta in 2021, is that this would spark negotiations with the federal government on all these different transfer payments and start getting this conversation going in Canada, because it's hard to ignore a referendum from the people. And there's a legal requirement from the Supreme Court that if there's a challenge to a part of the Constitution, like equalization, through referendum, then the federal government has to negotiate with that province.
I want to ask about one of the other points, which is called the Buffalo Corridor. It just so happens that the Senate committees, most recently the Banking Committee, has studied this notion of a corridor across the country. Yes, it would be for pipelines, but it would also be for fiber optics, and just a corridor in which you would negotiate the use of that land in advance and then run everything through it to kind of simplify all of these discussions that go on all the time with municipalities or indigenous groups or whatever. This has been, I think it started in the 50s, the first proposal for this. We're still not there.
It is frustrating. And I think the problem is that no one's picked a route. No one said, let's do this one. And I think it's been studied and studied and studied. No one's taken a leadership role in saying, let's pick this one and start negotiations. The federal government has complete powers to set the corridor. They could say, we are going to designate this land, much like they did with the railroad and the highway 1, right? This has happened before, and it's a great nation building thing. It's a great economy building project that needs to be done, because it's really difficult to get infrastructure projects approved in this country these days. And so we need a designated corridor. It totally makes sense. It's also a constitutional right for landlocked provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan to have unequivocal access to port, because we're export-based economies that need access to that port. And right now it's very limited. If you talk to anyone in a variety of different industries, it's very difficult. So
we had the absurd scene this year of Alberta shipping oil to New Brunswick via the Panama Canal.
Yeah, it's, if there's any evidence of a broken confederation, it's that we have to ship way down south to the Panama Canal because we can't trade with each other. That should have gone on Energy East, but we canceled that, of course, right? Due to some bad government policy and bad politics. And so, politically speaking, we have a major issue in this province or in this country. And I think the biggest problem of all is that our politics support the divisions. That's the biggest thing, is that it's all, the vote is concentrated, the voting power is concentrated in the East, and the economy is concentrated in the West. So it makes sense for Eastern politicians to promise the East something for nothing, which actually works because you can take it from smaller provinces with smaller populations but stronger economies and give it to them, and they like that, and they vote the people in that do that, and they don't vote for the people that don't promise them that.
And so you have this, enough, you remember something called the NEP, the National Energy Plan, which was invented by the current Prime Minister's father, and it was the same notion. Now a two-price system for oil, it's more complicated, but it did seem to benefit the East at the expense of the West, period, full stop.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's done more overtly today, but it's certainly happening today. And, this pandemic has shown that. And I think even just seeing all the, recent scandals that are happening in Ottawa, it's, there's no contracts out West for all these friends of the different politicians. You just have so much political power concentrated in one part of the country. You need some sort of a shift and realignment to have a stronger federation. And this, this plan that we have, this 5-point plan, is really just part of it, but there's definitely going to have to be more after this. This is the first step.
Let me just touch on quickly the Alberta pension plan modeled after the Quebec pension plan, provincial tax collection plans, and a review of trade and immigration policies. Things that Quebec have, for all intents and purposes, negotiated in the country. You're saying, why doesn't this area negotiate the same? So they have more job creation, obviously, if you're collecting provincial taxes here. That means somebody's hired, but you're not asking for something that's not ever been heard of before. This is an agreement that we see with other provinces.
That's right. And for the people that think, oh, this is wild, this is crazy, no, it's already happening in the country, and it's quite reasonable. In fact, I think it really is because Alberta and Saskatchewan and the West in general has really grown up. This is not 1905 anymore where we're struggling
Mhm.
little provinces. We're established. We know what we're doing. We probably know how to govern ourselves much better than Ottawa does. In fact, we know that because Ottawa doesn't really understand what's happening out here. And it makes sense. They're far removed. This is a very large country. And so these are ways to start taking back control of financially and just having autonomy in general to make decisions for our own people. With an Alberta pension plan, we can design the plan the way we want it rather than having Ottawa determine everything for us. And there's lots of different ways we can do this. Alberta pension plan is just one example. So we kind of took these different things and said, okay, let's put 5 kind of key action items that we should start with. Let's do these, and then let's look for other opportunities after that. And on the pension plan, I think it's important to note that it's transferable across the country. A lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to lose if I move out of Alberta and I was
Right.
contributing to the APP, I'm going to lose it. Well, no, you would transfer to CPP just like you do in Quebec. There's lots of different ways to do that. Seniors aren't going to lose their pensions. I honestly don't understand why there's a lot of people on the, I would consider on the left side of the spectrum in Alberta and in other places that just disagree with this just overtly for whatever reason. Like they don't even have any really good reason, and they just rally against it, and I don't understand why. The fact that we can take control of this and design a system that's better, that we could actually pay less in Alberta for more benefits because Alberta contributes disproportionately to CPP, and we would have complete control over it and negotiate things with CPP and make sure seniors today and people kind of nearing retirement age would be protected. There's no reason not to do that, and it's
Have
we need
to,
to move forward on it.
sorry, you have to manage relations with a lot of people. As you say, you've got political opponents, but you've
Yeah.
also got, we touched on this briefly, Indigenous groups that have relations with the Crown, with the federal government. This is a high risk proposition for them to start negotiating province by province, even 2 provinces joined together.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's a whole nother conversation, I think, of how the Indigenous groups play with it in this, because obviously there's treaties and relationships with the federal government. So I think that's further down the road.
Okay.
Obviously, there's lots of good relations with Indigenous peoples and the provinces, and those have to be respected and negotiated. On the Buffalo corridor and different trade corridors, that's a huge piece of it, right? Is trying to figure out how that's all going to work. But this is where if we had a strong federal government, they would recognize what's happening in these provinces and say, okay, let's take some leadership, let's set a route, and let's start negotiating. But no one's ever done that. And
Well,
I
and the
still can't
issue
figure out why.
now is really, I think that we're all facing when you look at the debt and deficit numbers, is that there has to be a recovery in this province or in this country, and there is going to have to be development of the energy and agricultural sectors to make that happen, or redevelopment, or an allowance of their activity. We need to have markets secured and access secured. So it's going to be a big issue. You've got lots of people who've signed on to this, business leaders and whatnot. What's the next step?
Well, I think it's to get a little more information on Alberta pension plan, tax collection plans, how this is all going to work. And the Jason Kenney government is working hard on this, I believe. And they've done some good work to date with the Fairness Alberta panel. I think Saskatchewan should do a similar panel in some way to get a lot of this information on the table and do the due diligence. But then let's start implementing it. Let's start working towards it. Let's say, okay, we're absolutely going to do this. Let's set a date for the equalization referendum. Let's set a date to negotiate our way out of the pension plan, the Canada pension plan. Let's set a date for how we're going to collect our taxes and start requesting of the federal government, we want more control over immigration. And then also pick a route for a corridor, even if it's imperfect at the start, let's pick it and start negotiating. So it's about taking leadership. And I think the collective wisdom of this group that kind of helped put this together, they're very successful in a lot of ways, and they know how to make things happen. And it's about someone standing up and saying, let's do it this way. Let's have 5 key focuses and start making progress, because if we just talk forever, nothing's going to change and we're all going to be worse off.
Well, we're actually in a moment going to talk to one of those signatories to the Buffalo Project, along serving MLA, a cabinet minister, and one of the founders of the Saskatchewan Party, June Draude. But Derek, thank you very much for laying this out for us. Really, really interesting project and idea.
Thanks for your interest, Senator. Appreciate it.
Great. Derek Robinson. All right, stay with us when we come back in just a moment. June Draude. Well, whenever you guys are ready.
I am ready. So let's hear now from one of those people who put their name, signed their name on this call to action. Long-serving MLA, member of the Legislative Assembly, as we say here in Saskatchewan, cabinet minister, and a founder of the Saskatchewan Party. June Draude joins us from Kelvington, Saskatchewan, just up the road. Thanks, June, for being here.
Thank you very much, Senator Wallin.
All right, so let's talk about this. Why on earth would a mainstream politician, you are no longer serving, you're not in cabinet, you have retired, but why would you put your name to this?
I am retired from government, but I'm not retired for caring about my province or my country. When I watch what's happening right now, especially during COVID, I rarely hear Saskatchewan's name heard. I don't hear about the issues we have with unemployment, the businesses that are failing or faltering or working very hard. We are just continuing to work along the way we always have. I feel often like we're a tag-along member of Confederation, and I think this is the right time to say Saskatchewan is here, and we have the opportunity to show the country and the world who we are.
Are you really also trying to send that message that this is not some separatist move, because there is that, and there is that sentiment, and it's not to be ignored. A lot of people feel like this just isn't fixable, and so if the two provinces exited, that might be the better thing to do. That's not what you're saying.
I am definitely not saying that. I am a Canadian. My dad was in the forces. I stood up with the flag. I still do. I see many benefits of being part of this Canadian family. I just believe that it's time to look at the contract, which is a type of contract we signed at Confederation, saying this is what we can do. But now, 115 years later, things have changed right around the world. Saskatchewan has changed, and we have an opportunity to say there are things that we can do differently in our province that we didn't know that we could do 115 years ago. We didn't even think about. One of the things that I'm so proud of the fact that I think most of the world doesn't know that Saskatchewan is a home to ATMs. The credit unions in Saskatchewan started ATMs. We had the first debit card transaction. We can do things, and yet we're still seen as a tag along, or we're ignored, or they just take us for granted. I want more than that. I want better than that for our province.
Well, that's the other thing that it's hard to explain, where, the old notion of hewers of wood and drawers of water, and somehow we're just a province filled with farmers driving around in wheat fields. We talk regularly to people that are on the cutting edge of technology, of solving the world's problems, whether it's food security or energy. There is a lot going on here that doesn't seem to be either noticed or recognized.
You know that there's a man in Saskatchewan who was the innovator, has the world's first driverless tractor. It's not in mass production right now, but it was done here in Saskatchewan. We're not just the farmers that people imagine that used to wear coveralls that had a straw in their mouth. These are business people that are providing food to the world. And we need to get our profile changed.
The other thing, I guess, that we've all seen through COVID is that major corporations have started changing the way they do business, having people work at home, using technologies. Individuals have had to change the way they live and figure out ways to deal with their parents or grandparents or their children or grandchildren. Everybody's changed. And the one process that is the slowest to react is the parliamentary process, the political process. We're struggling how to conduct debates or committee meetings or do votes or have political conventions or elections. It's really slow on that side of things.
So when I joined the political world in 1995, I walked into a system that hadn't changed since 1905, and it still hasn't. I cannot believe that we are in a country or in a world we're allowed to send thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars by email or transfers. We can't figure out a way to do something different, like voting or having our voice heard more frequently or more often. Even to have members having to go into the legislature the same way that they do, that's got to change. And that's why when we started the Saskatchewan Party, we said, let's take the good things about what happens when you're in government, but let's rethink them and do things differently. I think this is the opportunity now, as we have time to think about what's happening in our world. We're sitting at home, most of us. What can we do differently? And that's and changing the way we are seen as provinces, as Saskatchewan, Alberta, is one of the top things that comes to my mind.
Now, June, I've known you for a lot of years, and you are an optimist, and you are the glass is half full, not empty kind of person. But realistically, you spend a lot of time in politics. Do you think there is somebody, and I put this question to Derek, is there somebody to have this conversation with? If they were prepared to listen, wouldn't they have already been listening?
Sometimes I'm scared you're right when you say that, but I want to believe that there are people out there that see things that could be different. I like to think of it as innovators here, but man, when people in downtown Toronto or in central Canada are looking, they must see that that things are getting to be broken. I don't want to say they are broken, but they're close to it, and I have to believe that we can change it. I don't want to risk throwing the baby out with the bathwater. As we said, I still think we need Canada, but at the time, right now, we have to try our best, and I'm afraid I'm not as optimistic as I used to be that the federal government would care, but we've got to keep trying. And I think they have both premiers and the elected members and people on the ground like me and you and Derek, the 60 people that signed. That's got to send a message that things are unhappy here.
We try and have those conversations. As you know, the Senate's all about that. We are supposed to be the provincial representatives to give voice to those people here who aren't maybe as represented as they should be because of some of the imbalances in Confederation. But it's hard. You talk about what Bill 69 means, not just to the energy sector, but to every small business and every family that's affected by that. You talk about legislation that would declare bread to be unhealthy, and you realize that people don't understand even the process of the products that we create and where it comes from. Bread isn't from a store shelf, and meat isn't from the freezer. It comes from the animals and the products that we raise and produce and create. It's kind of a basic conversation.
Senator, I'm one of those, maybe not the big percentage of people who do watch politics, who do watch what the Senate is doing, and I hear the comments that you're making. I remember your speech, your talk about bread, and I really was surprised to learn to understand that people just don't get it. It's so basic, and sometimes you feel like you're blinking in the dark, but winking in the dark, I guess it is. But we've got to keep trying, just like you keep trying. I believe we all have to keep trying, saying that we have to change what people can do. Saskatchewan and Alberta have grown up. There are things that we can be doing, and I look at these 5 issues that we're talking about right now, and they all make so much sense, and they could make a difference and probably benefit the rest of Canada, but they're not listening. So this letter to me is a start. I would love to find out from the senators and the MPs if any of them have heard from it. Have they actually read the letter, and what is their feedback on it? I know everybody's questions in the Parliament right now are not focused on this, but right. I sure wish somebody would stand up and ask that question.
I want to just ask you a final point about the timing, because even this is a conversation you have with people who are part of the Wexit movement or the separatist movement, which is, you're landlocked. Like you can't have the kind of independence you dream of here, because it's hard for us to get any product, not just energy, to oil and gas, or to get it to Tidewater, or to get products in. It's kind of the same thing. We're struggling with COVID, massive provincial and federal debts and deficits at this point, and everybody's looking for a way to rebuild or save or their province or create jobs. Is this the time to say it, or is it the best time to do it? I can't decide whether your calls will be heard or not.
I believe it is the right time. I believe that people do have some time now to think about bigger picture issues. Nobody understands, if you don't live in the prairie provinces, that the wheat, the bread that you're eating in downtown Toronto, the grain probably comes from out here. They don't know that the mustard, the pulse crops, the beasts, the animals, a lot of them are coming from here. The oil that people are not think that they don't need. We still need to be able to put fuel in vehicles until the world changes, and how many decades from now where some of that has changed. We can't write everything off, and there has to be a better understanding that what we need to work together to change. When the car was invented, when Ford invented the car, we didn't go out and shoot all the horses because we didn't think we needed them anymore. Of course we do. We need the issues, like we need products like oil and gas to say we have to continue on, and if we make changes, fine, but in the meantime, life has to continue on. And this is the time to start having those serious conversations, because people have time.
And the other argument, I guess, that we just don't really get to make very loudly is it's not just about oil and gas. We do actually feed huge chunks of the world, including our own country, from here.
The lentils, pulse crops that we send around the world, I think it's about 70% of the lentils that leave they're grown go across the world. Over 80% of the mustard goes across the world. There's the food that we have, and some of the make sense ideas even. I'm changing the subject a little bit, but like our pension plan, things that make sense, we can do that. And yet there's never an opportunity to have that discussion. I'm hoping maybe the premiers can say, if we would have a prime minister that was listening, let's have an agenda with the first ministers where the agenda is written by the premiers, not by the prime minister.
One of the things that you've been intimately involved with, both as a cabinet minister and in your subsequent life, is dealing with First Nations. And a lot of this discussion has to happen either with them first before you go to Ottawa, or during. I don't think you can do it after.
I agree totally. In fact, I would think that there would be a number of leaders who would say, let's talk about this. It's not just us. When I'm talking about Saskatchewan and Alberta, I'm talking about all of our citizens, and that includes the First Nations. So bring them into the conversation and see if there's an added emphasis when we talk about the way of life that we have in Canada. That was our First Nations were here. What else can we be doing? I know a number of chiefs who would have a conversation. I don't know what they would say, but I know that they would want to be part of a conversation that would change the way we are operating as a province. And there could be added value and strength when we say we're talking about all of our citizens, and we're proud to be part of that. So I think that this is another great opportunity.
June, thanks very much. Thanks for still caring about your country, even though you're not serving. And thanks for having this discussion with us today.
And thank you, Senator, for caring as well. Take care.
Bye-bye. So June Draude and Derek Robinson on the Buffalo project. It's worth following what their activities are going to be over the next few months and years. It is a conversation we probably all should be having. I'm Pamela Wallin. Thanks for joining us for another edition of No Nonsense.